I think it's time for another memory analysis lab, don't you think? In today's video, we'll be going through a lab from Cyber Defenders called RedLine, where we get to use tools like volatility, strings, and memproc fs to analyze a memory dump, so we can try and trace the steps of an attacker. Let's jump right into it. To get started with today's lab, you want to head over to cyberdefenders.org and sign up for an account if you don't have one already. Once you've logged into your account, head over to the Labs section, and then what we'll do is search up for RedLine. And this is the one that we want to select, the one under Endpoint Forensics. And let's quickly go through the scenario. As a member of the Security Blue Team, your assignment is to analyze a memory dump. Nice. Using RedLine and volatility tools. Now, it is saying using RedLine and volatility, but honestly, you can use whatever tools you want. Your goal is to trace the steps taken by the attacker on the compromised machine and determine how they managed to bypass the Network Intrusion Detection System, aka NIDS. Your investigation will identify the specific malware family employed in the attack and its characteristics. Now, if you take a look over on the top left corner here, you do see the tools of choice that Cyber Defenders is recommending. So we have volatility and we have strings. But typically for a memory dump, what I like to also include is a tool called memproc fs. So I will not only use volatility, but I will also use memproc fs and also strings. So let's get started. I'll click on the download lab files, save that out. And again, do be aware of the password itself. It is cyberdefenders.org. Now, while we wait for the download to be completed, if you don't have memproc fs yet, what you want to do here is open up a tab and search up memproc fs GitHub. Now, of course, this is only if you want to follow along and use the same tools that I'm using. What memproc fs will allow us to do is right here. View physical memory as files in a virtual file system. This is insane. Because with volatility, everything's via CLI, so the command line interface, and sometimes, I'm going to be honest, that can be a little hectic at times and just not the cleanest. Whereas memproc fs, it will open up the memory in a virtual file system. So you can essentially view the memory dump as if it was like your C drive. And I'll demonstrate this in a bit. Our file should be downloaded here. Yes, it is. Perfect. I'm going to extract this out, and the password is cyberdefenders.org. And while we extract that, head back over to Cyber Defenders and let's take a look at some of the questions here. Actually, you know what? Let's not do that yet. Let's just go through the memory dump and see what we can find. Afterwards, we can then start answering some of the questions here. Perfect. So now our memory dump is extracted. I am using a Windows 10 machine, but I also have Windows subsystem for Linux installed. So that is what I'll be using. I'll hold Shift, right click, and open Linux shell here. Now, if you want to install your own Windows subsystem for Linux, all you have to do is search up Windows subsystem for Linux and then click on the How to Install Linux on Windows with WSL. Fairly straightforward, pretty easy. Alrighty, let me see here. I'll clear out the screen, type in ls just to make sure that the memory dump is here, and it is. And I already have volatility installed, but before we do that, I am going to run a strings, and I'll point it over to the memory dump, and I'll output this to strings-memdump.txt. All right, after about a minute, our strings is completed, and I'll open that up here. Now, it is quite a large file, so it will take some time to open up. However, what you can also do here is you don't need to output it out. You can just run strings on the memory dump itself. And I'm just going to pipe this into less. That way I can see the first couple strings here. And hitting space will move on to the next page. Now, the reason why I'm running strings is just to quickly see if I can find anything interesting. For example, I see a file that is being referenced under the system32 print. Now, does this mean anything? Probably not, at least not right now. But you might actually find some interesting stuff inside of the memory dump itself by running strings. For example, some of the things that you can find are what we saw earlier, executable names. There's also domains, IP addresses. But anyways, since our strings file is now opened, what I'm going to do is just minimize this just for now. Go ahead and press Q on the keyboard just to close that out. And the next thing I'll do here is run volatility on this memory dump. Now I am using volatility 3 version 2.26. And what I like to do first is, and before I move on, let me just go ahead and maximize this. That should look a lot cleaner for you guys. Type in vol-f to point it to your memory dump. And then for the plugin, I like to use windows.malfind. What this plugin will do is that it will take a look at all of the processes within this memory dump and then pull out anything that it deems suspicious. Now, do note that there are many legitimate programs that will show up here because that's just how they are. But sometimes you might actually find a nice pivot point or a starting point. For example, I think it is completed. Let me just quickly check. No, it is still going. Okay, let's just wait a bit. All right, after a couple minutes, our malfind finally finished, but I did change the font just a little bit so we can see this a lot better. Starting from the bottom here, if you take a look at the left, there is a PID. So it's your process identifier. And then you have your executable name or your file name, and then your memory space here. And you also see the value of the memory protection for this particular process. Now, like I mentioned before, some legitimate programs can show up here, such as smartscreen.exe, but we might actually find some interesting activity, especially for those that have a MZ header within memory. And if you're not sure what MZ means, which is, now that I'm looking at it right here, if we see this, what this means is that there's essentially a binary within this particular memory space. And if we take a look at the process of interest, it is 1etx.exe. And the process identifier, or PID, is 5896. What this will tell me now, because there is an MZ header within the memory space, this is likely something of interest. Now, without going too much into memory forensics, we'll just leave it as is. Now, I am going to open up a notepad. Click on new window, minimize this, and let's just type in our notes. So the PID of interest is 5896. The process name, 1etx.exe. And I'll also grab the memory protection is page underscore execute underscore read write. Now, why is it suspicious? Well, has MZ header in memory. And now that I have this in my notepad, I can always reference it later on whenever I need to. Let me see if there's any other MZ headers in this particular memory dump here. And it doesn't appear to be so. Okay, nice. Let's clear out the screen. Now that I have a process of interest, the next thing I like to do is take a look at any of the network connections. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because I want to find out, does this process establish any outbound connections? And to answer that question, I'll type in vol again, -f, point it to the memory dump, and let's do windows.net scan. This will start scanning all of the network information, aka your netstat if you've ever used that. Actually, you know what? Why don't I just run it on my computer? So it's kind of like this, netstat, and it'll show us this kind of information, or similar to it. While this is running, let's go and scroll all the way up. That way we can see the headers here. Now there is the offset number, your protocol, local address, local port, foreign address, foreign port, state, PID, owner, created. Knowing the headers, I can now understand what these values are so I don't get lost. Now, I'm not really interested in anything that is listening just yet. What I'm more interested in are statuses that are established. And what that tells me is that there was a successful connection between that IP, which was made by a particular process. And I think this is completed. Yeah, okay, perfect. Let's take a look. And scrolling up, I do see a couple. Actually, you know what I'll do? Because this is a little messy, let's just output this to netscan.txt. And generally, this is a good habit. Anytime you run a plugin, always output it to a file. That way you can just reference it rather than rerunning it every time. Otherwise, you'll be like me, sitting here and just waiting for the output to complete, wasting a lot of time. So always try and remember to output it to a file. Now that that's done, let's go ahead and open the file. File meaning the text file here. All right, let's take a look. Are there any established connections? And we can just find established. There's nothing that says established. What about estab? Nothing with estab. That's okay. What about our process of interest, which is 1etx.exe? And we do get a hit with 5480 as the process identifier. Now, if I go back over to my notes, we can see that this process was listed under our malfind, and it has a different process identifier. You know what? I'll put that in here. 5480 process 1etx.exe. This was found under netscan.txt. And you know what? Let's also do the date and time here. I'll say created. There you go. All right, let's keep looking. There is a status of closed. So this process closed this connection. And look at that. It's going out to this external IP address of 77.91.124.20 over towards port 80. That is a good one to note down. And that is the process of 5896, the one that we listed up here. So found under netscan.txt, outbound towards 77.91.124.20 on port 80. And when was this created? Let me go ahead and copy that too. Created. There you go. Now taking a look at the one right under it, we do see a ton2socs.exe. This could be interesting. It might be related to something, but right now we don't really have too much information about it. The thing that stuck out to me was that it occurred a minute before this connection. See right here, 2300 and 2301. And ton2socs sounds like some kind of proxy. So let me go ahead and copy that. And let's search out what the heck ton2socs is. Okay, it's an executable file that is part of a software package associated with VPN services. Now, that's interesting because VPNs are quite common amongst attackers. This might actually be related to this malicious activity here. So you know what? Let me go ahead and mark that down. Created, the process was ton2socs. The process ID, 4628, let's do PID. And the created date and time. Just for safe measures, let's type in the IP address as well. So outbound 38.121.43.65. Nice. Let's keep it going. What else do we find here? Yeah, I think that's it. Okay, cool. Let me go ahead and minimize this. Head back over to my volatility. Let's clear out the screen. Now that we've revealed a bit more information of interest, the next thing I like to do here is take a look at the processes that are running on this machine. And to do that, I'll run a plugin called PSList and PSTree. The difference between the two is that PSList will list out all of the process lists. PSTree is going to list out the same thing, but also it will show the parent-child relationship. So I'll hit the up arrow key here. Let's go ahead and remove that and run the plugin of PSList. I forgot to change the font just a bit. That way you guys can see a lot clearer. So PSList, and then I'll output this to pslist.txt. Once that is done, I'm going to rerun it again, but this time using the plugin of PSTree. Hit the up arrow key, type in PSTree, and let's run the plugin PSTree. Perfect. They're both completed, so let's go ahead and open up the file. I'm going to start off with PSList here. Go ahead and expand that, and hopefully you guys can see that okay. Now let me zoom in just a bit. There you go. I think that's pretty clear. So take a look at the headers here. We got the PID, process ID, PPID, your parent process ID, image file name, offset, threads, handles, session ID, WOW64. So this kind of sounds a bit odd, but essentially WOW64 is indicating whether or not this particular process is a 32-bit process. If it says true under WOW64, then that means that process is a 32-bit process. Now, if you see false, that means that process is a 64-bit process. We have create time, exit time, file output. Now you might be wondering, Stephen, why are you looking at processes? Well, that is because I want to identify the parent-child relationship, aka did this particular process spawn another process? And if so, what did it spawn? What did it do? Rinse and repeat. We did have a process of interest, which again was the 1etx.exe. So let's go ahead and search that up. I'll type in 1etx.exe, click on find next. Of course you didn't find anything because it's not one text. 1etx. There you go. So now we can see that the process ID that was found was 5480. And if we take a look at our notes, that is the second one that we found under NetScan. The parent process of it is 448. And you might be wondering, what is the process for that? Well, all we need to do here is just copy this, paste it in here, and find what the process of 448 is. And that is right here. So service host at the top, it has a process identifier of 448. And what this tells me is that servicehost.exe spawned our process of interest. Now, does that mean anything? Who knows? Right now, this is just what we see. Let me go back and type in 1etx.exe. And look at that, we have another one. So there is 5896, where the parent process is 8844. And if you take a look on the right-hand side, it does say true. So if you recall, that means it is a 32-bit process. Now, why does that matter? Well, a lot of attackers generally use 32-bit processes, so it will always work. That's a nice little threat hunting tip. Now, not all 32-bit processes are malicious or suspicious, but it is always a good idea to take a look at what is currently running in your environment using 32-bit processes. Baseline those, and then you can probably find some malicious activity in the future. So knowing this, I am going to open up my notes, and this one was 5896, which is this one right here. I'm going to say 32-bit process, and the parent PID is 8844. Right underneath the 1etx.exe, I did see a run DLL that was spawned from this particular process. As you can see here, right? There's the process identifier for the 1etx, which is 5896. And then right underneath it is run DLL32, where the parent process identifier is our 1etx. And our run32.exe process is a 32-bit process. Maybe there's some kind of process injection, DLL injection, DLL sideloading, who knows? But this is a nice thing to note here. Let's do child process. This is run DLL32.exe. The PID is 7732. The parent PID is 5896. And this was created right here. Awesome. We're getting a fairly decent amount of information out of this memory dump. The next thing I like to take a look at is the command line. So let's go and do that. Back into the terminal here. I'll type in cmd line and let's output that to command line.txt. Go ahead and open that up. And let's see. Now there isn't too many processes here, so I'll just drag this down. And here we can see our 1etx as well as the run DLL32. There is no command line happening here. All right, now I want to show you memproc fs. To get started with memproc fs, you just need to simply download it and extract it from their GitHub. Currently, I am using the version 5.15.4. And if we take a look at the valid options at the bottom here, we can see dash device. This says select memory acquisition device or memory dump file to use. And that is what we'll be using. Clear up the screen, /memproc, hit tab for auto completion, dash device, and we'll point it over to our memory dump. Just like so, and hit enter. Now go ahead and open up your file explorer, and we should have a new virtual file system right here that we can start traversing, which is, again, pretty cool. What I like to do immediately is go over to the sys directory and just kind of get some more information about what I'm looking at, such as the computer name, username, etc., and even the time zone as well, which in our case, it is nothing. But if we take a look at the computer name, we have it here. Let me go ahead and copy that. And now we can add that into our notes. Computer name is that. Close that out. We have users and there's nothing here. Okay. We do have a net folder. So this is going to be the similar output to our net scan, for example, right here. And there's also a -v as well for verbose. So if I click on that, we could actually see the process path, which is quite interesting. So if we search up our process of interest, which was 1etx. Let's take a look at the process path. It is under device, hard disk volume 3, users, username, tammam. Let's write that in here. User is tammam. And this particular executable is listed under the temp directory with a random, well, it kind of looks like an identifier, I guess, but random directory nonetheless. Out of my own curiosity, what if I do, let's just type in temp, like that. Are there any other executables within this directory? It doesn't seem like it. Yeah, nothing. Okay, who knows? Maybe there might have been something. We do see this as well, the ton2 socks here. And it's coming from a folder called outline. Based off of our research earlier, this is our VPN of choice. And yeah, I'm just interested in seeing what other information I might have missed. But anyways, that's net. The next thing I want to take a look at is the proc. So our PS list or process list. Similar to before, if I open up proc.txt, we do see, ooh, that's actually reminded me, I did not open up PS tree yet. Let me show you very quickly what that looks like. And I apologize for jumping everywhere. So this is how process tree looks like. There is a lot going on here. And if you've never seen this before, you probably be like, what the heck am I looking at? But essentially, if you take a look over to the PID column, you notice that there is a number. That is your process identifier. And if you take a look at the next entry here, you do have a process identifier, but you also have an asterisk. What is that? So the asterisk is essentially just a visualization, right? If you don't see an asterisk, for example, this number 4, you can infer that that is your parent process. And then each asterisk is a child process. So for example, the process identifier of 4 spawned a child of 1280. Well, spawned 3 childs. First one is 1280, 108, and the other one is 332. So it spawned 3 processes. Another example, let me search up my 1ETX. So this one right here, 5896 is the process identifier, and we don't see any asterisks beside it. So that means it is our parent process. If you take a look right under it, there is one asterisk here, and it is our run DLL 32 process. What that tells me is that this 1ETX spawned our run DLL 32. So PS3 does a fairly good job to try and visualize the parent-child relationship, rather than us having to manually search for the parent process ID and correlate it like that. With that being said, let's go back over to memprocfs. And we were looking at the proc.txt. Now they do a similar output like PS3, but instead of asterisks, it's a dash. So we see 1 dash, 2 dash, 3, 4, etc. But this kind of shows us the same information that we saw over on PS list. However, if we take a look at the proc-v, this gives us a little bit more information because again, -v is verbose. We do have our command line and the file path. So let's search up our 1ETX one more time. We can confirm that it is, again, the user tammam and is located under the temporary directory. Doing the same search what I did for the network, let me search up temp, which again, I'm just trying to figure out is if there's any other processes available or that were executed from that temporary directory. And it doesn't appear to be so. Cool. There are a lot of other information that we can start digging into, but I'm not quite sure if that is what we need to do just yet. For example, you can take a look into services, your tasks, drivers, certificates, just a bunch of information available. But for now, I think we have more than enough information to start answering some of the questions. All right, heading over to Cyber Defenders. Let's take a look at the questions here. What is the name of the suspicious process? That one we've been searching for quite a bit, so that one is 1etx.exe. Question number 2, what is the child process name of the suspicious process? This, I believe, was run DLL32, because if we saw the process tree, we saw that 1ETX did indeed spawn this particular process. What is the memory protection applied to the suspicious process memory region? This is why we took notes. The memory protection was page execute read write. Number 4, what is the name of the process responsible for the VPN? Thankfully, we did see this spawn a minute before, or was created a minute before our 1ETX process. This one I believe was called ton2socks.exe, but let me make sure. Notes, ton2socks.exe. Yep. Wrong? You know what? Let's go back over to our PS tree. Oh, wait. What is the process responsible? So I'm thinking they're talking about the parent of ton2socks maybe? Yeah, you know what? Let's go over to, actually, I'll just use this proc-v, and let's search for ton2socks. Let's see here. We have this right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dashes. And looking at the top, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 dashes. What this tells me is that outline.exe spawned ton2socks.exe. So outline.exe is the one responsible for it. Outline.exe. There you go. What is the attacker's IP address? We did see this earlier. That was the outbound connection made by 1etx.exe. And that was this one, 77.91.124.20. Now, if we were doing a real investigation, we would then pivot into OSINT, utilize VirusTotal, for example, abuse IPDB, Alien Vault, just to get some additional context, and then continue to pivot to reveal maybe additional files that were dropped, additional network connections established, etc. That way you can really scope out your environment rather than focusing on a single piece of information. What is the full URL of the PHP file? Ooh, full URL. Now, in our memory dump, we searched using volatility and memprocfs. We also used strings. In both of our volatility and memproc, we didn't really see a URL. Let's take a look into our strings. So this is the output of our strings, and what I'll do is just search up HTTP. Maybe there might be something here. Okay, this might take a year and a half, so instead what I'll do is, let's go ahead and close this out. Clear out the screen, and let's move back into my memory dump location. Just like that, ls, and there it is. Okay, what I'll do here is type in egrep-i to ignore case sensitivity, and I'm going to look for anything that contains HTTP or HTTPS, and let's point it over to my strings output. Whew. Okay, that is a lot. Let's do a head. So I look at the first 10 entries. Okay, there is definitely a win HTTP create URL, so something's happening. Let's do a -20. Whoops, like that. There you go. I don't know how I added a space there, but okay, what about a -50? Ooh, what is this? LP cook tracking. You know what? Even a, while I was talking about that, I see this. That might be a little interesting. But anyways, what I was going to say is instead of doing that, why don't we search for something we know for sure? And that is our IP address of interest. So what was our attacker's IP again? That was this one right here, 77. So let's copy that and paste that in there. Bingo, there you go. Look at that. We have HTTP, this bad boy, over to the index.php. Sweet. That is our answer. So let's paste that in here, hit submit. Good. I was going to say, if that's incorrect, ooh man, we're going to have to sift through a lot of data. Question number 7, what is the full path of the malicious executable? We got this through the proc-v output of memprocfs. And I don't think I noted that down. Yeah, I forgot to note that down. Amateur mistake. That's okay. It's a good thing I have my proc-v here. And let's search up 1ETX. There you go. Copy all of this up to the users because we don't want this hard disk volume. Instead, we're just going to simply say C:\\, paste that in. Ooh, there's 2 backslashes here. Let's remove that and we should be good. Awesome. Just like that, you completed the RedLine lab. I'm not gonna lie, analyzing memory dumps is quite a challenge for me since I rarely do it. However, I am thankful that I created myself a process that allows me to work with a memory dump as long as the tools exist. And I would highly encourage you to create your own process as well. That way you can always refer to it if and when that time comes for you to analyze a memory dump to identify suspicious or malicious activity. That is it for the video, and I hope that you found that informative. If you did, let me know by hitting that like button and subscribe if you want to. Remember to stay curious and do things differently.